Hey guys, thanks for coming back and joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. Glad to have you back. So, in today's episode, we're going to talk about what causes anxiety. Conversations around events that cause anxiety, but really wanted to kind of understand like what is it in your body that causes anxiety. And we've talked a lot on this channel. If you've listened to our stuff before, we try to be logical, we try to be fact based, and we try to understand things so we can make good decisions. So, on something like anxiety, which afflicts tons and tons of people, right? None of us have not felt anxiety previously in our sweaty palms, the dry mouth, the butterflies in your stomach. We all know what it feels like. We're tied up in knots. We're thinking about something. We're obsessing on something. It goes over and over in our mind. Um, what causes that? Like, what is it in your body that's going on? And when you think about it, that feeling is similar in good circumstances. Some good circumstances cause anxiety, and some not so good circumstances cause anxiety. So, some good circumstances that cause anxiety, the anticipation of a first kiss or a first date with someone, a sporting event that you're watching where your team is in it and it's a tight, hotly contested event and you want your team to win and they do, and that's great, but like it creates that anxiety during the event or leading up to the event. And speaking of which, my Ducks just beat Ohio State in a big game in the Big Ten. So way to go, Ducks. But we were anticipating. We live in Cleveland, Ohio, so we're 2 hours north of Ohio State. So we're in Ohio State country, and we had a lot of people saying negative things to us wearing our Oregon gear the last couple of days, proudly and gladly. So it's a good thing, but that causes anxiety too. The drive to the hospital when you're going to give birth or when your wife is going to give birth, right? That's an anxious ride. That's an anxious time leading up to that. There's anxiety, and that's a good thing. So that causes anxiety just as well as some of the not so good scenarios. You get ambiguous feedback from your boss or your company is struggling and you're not quite sure how it's going to play out. You bomb a test at school, or you didn't do as well as you thought you would do on a presentation at work. You text something kind of off the cuff to somebody and you're not quite sure how they're going to take it and you're waiting for them to respond. Those things all cause anxiety as well. So, what is it that happens in your body? In some scenarios are really good. It's not just negative scenarios that cause anxiety. Some positive scenarios can cause anxiety too. So, regardless of the scenario, we've all experienced it. But what causes it? We wanted to know what is it that goes on in your body when those things happen, so we could try to understand it, which we think would give us a better chance of developing a plan to short circuit it or overcome it when it inevitably does happen to you. So, the first thing we're going to do is just define anxiety. So, off of the APA, American Psychological Association, their website, anxiety is a feeling of apprehension, tension, or uneasiness that stems from the anticipation of danger. So even in the good scenarios we talked about, you want a good outcome, but there's the potential that you could get a bad outcome. The first date goes horribly, your team loses, there's complications with your childbirth, whatever the case may be. There's anxiety that's created by that. So you're anticipating some potential danger or some potential negative coming out of it, even if it's a good thing. It's a future oriented mood that's a complex response that prepares for perceived threats. So it's your body's way of being on guard to try to protect you. It's your mind's way of being on guard to try to protect you. Now, does that always make it rational? No, it does not. Is it sometimes rational? Sure. Yeah, it's absolutely rational. If you're walking in the woods, you're on the lookout for bears, right? So there's situations if you're crossing the street or it's late at night, you're on guard because you want to make sure that you're safe and protected. There's anxiety that's created in those situations. Now, different than fear, fear is often used interchangeably with anxiety. That's a short lived response to a very specific threat. Fear is, oh shit, there's a car coming at me. I got to dodge it. Or, hey, I got to get this to the bank by 5 o'clock today or my check's going to bounce. Those are very specific. I got to get to school on time or I'm going to miss my test. That's fear. That's not anxiety. That's you're being afraid of a very specific threat or situation that's happening in your life. Anxiety is a longer term, longer period, forward looking feeling of dread or anxiousness around a diffuse, like a diffuse threat or a non-specific threat. You don't know exactly what's late waiting out there. You don't know exactly what the outcome's going to be, but it could be bad, and you're worried about it. That's anxiety. So I thought it was interesting the definition, the difference in definition between anxiety and fear. So don't confuse the two. Fear is a short-lived, hey, that specific thing is causing me problems right now. You know what you're afraid of in that instance. Anxiety is more ambiguous. You might be able to tie it to a specific thing, specific event, or you might not. And so anxiety is something that longer term, less defined, more ambiguous, I think is the right way to think about the definition of anxiety. So, what causes it? What goes on in your body? What makes it happen? The first thing pointed to on the brain structure. So, your brain is processing information and working through things, and there's different spots in your brain that are responsible for different things. The limbic system, in particular, processes emotions, and it may be hyperactive in people with anxiety. So, you may be more prone to anxiety simply because you have an overactive limbic system, which is where your emotions are processed. So you've heard people say, I'm naturally anxious. You've heard me say, I'm naturally not anxious. I don't know, maybe my limbic system doesn't work right or doesn't work the way it's supposed to. I don't know. I'm not real worried about it. Um, but, maybe that's why I don't, it's hard for me to understand. I can be empathetic. I try to be empathetic because I've been married to a person who is naturally very, very anxious for 30 plus years. And I care about her. I want good things for her. I want her life to go well. And I don't want her to be nervous or worried or uncomfortable. So I've learned coping techniques largely through dealing with her and helping her through issues much more than my own issues around anxiety. There's also another part in your brain, a specific thing in your brain called the amygdala, which manages fear and anxiety. And that's especially an important part of your limbic system. So you may just be naturally wired so that those are more active. They're more reactive to situations. They're more attuned to what's coming down the road. And it could just be that your brain structure is such that you're naturally more prone to respond to things with anxiety. We've talked about it before. Um, you know, Maybe you were born short. You can't make yourself tall. Maybe you were born with a fast metabolism or a slow metabolism, and it's hard to impact that. Maybe you were born with a natural proclivity towards math or reading or science or humanities, whatever the case may be. There are things that you were born with you might not necessarily have as much control over as other things. What you do have control over is how you manage those things and your reaction to those things. So you may not be able to stop the anxiety from happening, but you absolutely can change how you respond to it when you feel it coming on. And you can develop coping mechanisms and techniques for anxiety when you do feel it coming on that help you minimize it or manage it or compartmentalize it. And we've done lots of videos on these things. This is the meditation, this is the mindfulness, this is the deep breathing, this is the making a list of what's the worst that could happen. We've covered, so go back and watch some of our videos around how to manage stressful situations, how to manage a difficult conversation, how to do well in a negotiation, how to manage your anxiety, how to control your emotions. All of those are the things that you have control over. You may not have control over how the anxiety actually manifests itself in your body. So, the second part of that, not surprising, chemistry. So, there's all sorts of hormones and neurotransmitters in your body that make you think or feel a certain way. And there can be imbalances in those neurotransmitters. Specifically, what they called out were neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and GABA, which is a gamma aminobutyric butyric acid, sorry. That's why they shorten it for GABA, because it's hard to say. Those can contribute to anxiety. So the levels of those different neurotransmitters in your brain can make you more or less anxious depending on how much or little of those neurotransmitters exist at a specific time. And I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist. My degree's in finance. I'm not trained in any of this. I'm just a person who's experienced a lot of stuff in life, has been fairly successful at dealing with difficult and stressful situations in a calm and rational and logical way. And so I bet that those coping mechanisms that we've talked about previously are things that change the level of those neurotransmitters or hormones in your system and help you get those things back in balance and get to a more normal and rational thought process. And by the way, anxiety is not necessarily irrational. Maybe I talked in a previous episode about not liking loose teeth or anything to do with teeth. That's not real rational. But being afraid of a bear, that's pretty rational. Being afraid of a dark alley in a strange town, that's pretty rational. But sometimes it's not rational. Sometimes it's, oh, I'm worried that they're going to judge me. So what? That's not rational. That's not right. That you gotta get past that. And so I think a lot of those coping mechanisms help your brain regulate the neurotransmitters, the levels of neurotransmitters and hormones in your body to help you get to a better spot. So I found that interesting when we did the research for this episode. Number three is genetics. Like anxiety disorders can run in families, and that suggests genetics may play a role. When you think about what we talked about with brain structure and that you may have an overactive limbic system, maybe that's a genetic trait that can be passed through different generations in a family. So, and maybe not. My mom's pretty anxious. I've got at least one sister that's pretty anxious, but I've got another sister that's very much like me, where she doesn't worry about a lot of stuff and she's pretty level headed most of the time. And so I don't know. I don't know about how much genetics are, but there's absolutely studies that show that anxiety could be a genetic trait that is passed on depending on the genetics you get from your parents. And then number four, so just what triggers that? Stressful events. The things they listed out were abuse, death of a loved one, or being attacked can trigger anxiety. We listed some things that you encounter in your everyday life earlier in this episode that could absolutely trigger or cause anxiety as well. One thing that was on there that I found very interesting, they said that chronic exposure to stress can alter the brain structure. So if your brain is constantly exposed to stress, it can rewire itself in certain situations, and that may trigger or lead to additional anxiety or maybe less anxiety. Maybe you can rewire your brain to react differently in those situations, and that would be helpful in minimizing the impact anxiety has on you. So we all know, I'm 52. I know I'm a very different person than I was when I was 22, than I was 32, than I was 42. That checks out just from an eyeball test, from a real world scenario. I know I'm a different person and I think differently now than I did previously. I like to think I've developed more patience. I like to think I have a lot more life experience to draw on so that when things are tough or difficult or I get bad news or things seem stressful, I'm able to draw on that history and kind of recenter myself and refocus myself on, hey, let's stay calm. Let's work the problem. Let's come up with a solution. Let's not panic. Let's not freak out, because panicking and freaking out is wasted energy. It does us no good. We can't control it. So let's work on what we can control. Let's stay focused on the things we have control over and get to a better spot. And then they also noted some medical conditions, some heart, lung, and thyroid conditions can cause symptoms similar to anxiety. If you've ever had trouble breathing, if you've had pneumonia, or you've had the flu, or you've had things that make you just feel terrible, you know that you think differently. I remember I've had the flu twice in my life, and one time I was like, fuck, this might kill me. I don't know. I never felt that bad for that long. I had the flu for about 10 days. And a lot of times what people say is the flu isn't actually the flu. I've had the legit flu where it just like took it out of me a couple times in my life. Once when I was in second grade, and once as an adult. And like in second grade, I missed 2 weeks of school and lost 20 pounds when I weighed 60 pounds. And, it was a big deal. But some medical conditions can simulate, I don't even know if it's simulate, they can cause similar feelings to anxiety, which makes me think that there's some medical conditions that mess with your body's ability to regulate these neurotransmitters and these hormones and create sensations that are similar to anxiety. So I found it very interesting to figure out, or not even figure out, I found it very interesting to learn what trained professionals say about what causes anxiety in your body. And I always try to take, like we've talked about, I try to take a left brained, fact based, educated approach to problem solving. So if we're going to manage our anxiety and we're going to learn coping mechanisms that help us deal with our anxiety in productive ways, I think it's important to understand what actually goes on inside your body when it happens. So I found it interesting to put this episode together. I learned quite a few things when I put this episode together, and I hope that you're able to take these things and knowing that, hey, this is a chemical thing that's going on inside my body. I have to control my reaction to it, and I have to train myself to think differently when I feel these feelings coming on. I hope you find it useful and another tool in the toolkit to help improve yourself and create a better life. There you go, guys. Hope you find that helpful. Don't forget to head over to our website, saltygingertalk.com. We've got all of our podcast episodes available there. We've got a daily newsletter that we publish every weekday that you can subscribe to there. And we've got links to all our social media content on our website as well. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment to our episodes on whatever platform you consume them on. We really appreciate the support. We appreciate you guys coming back and checking us out. Hope you guys found this useful. Everybody have a great week, and we will see you next episode. Take care, guys.